Good evening, everyone. My name is Ioana Bauer, and I have the privilege of leading a Romanian CSO actually working on anti-human trafficking called eLiberare. We work in preventing and hopefully making human trafficking the exception. We are also part of the Rescue Freedom network that has partners in over 29 countries around the world. And before I start my intervention, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the organizing team, Congressman Pittenger. Thank you for including this topic always in these events. Thank you to the international team of the forum, to the national team as well. This is a lot of work. And also Anne Basham, thank you for the work that you're doing with the Human Trafficking Task Force, always making sure that this is a subject that's being addressed. Really appreciate your tireless work and dedication for our safety, basically, and for the safety of those who are maybe some of the most vulnerable people, just like we've heard. It's very moving to hear all of my panelists. So I'm going to try to be brief and tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing in the context of the Ukrainian war. And I'm also going to let you know that I'm launching more questions and I'm going to be giving out facts. So hopefully this will also be a challenge as to what are we going to do next. As we've heard throughout the day, and as we have each lived basically personally during the past few years, our world has been constantly changing, and what we have come to experience in our day-to-day life seems to challenge our idea of what the normal actually looks like. A few things, however, have gone without much disturbances. And one of those is the organized crime activity of human trafficking. Even more so, while most of us have been struggling to grapple with the situation caused by first the pandemic and now the war in Ukraine, certain categories of people have classified this as a business opportunity. I don't think I need to remind you again that over 12 million people have left Ukraine, and out of this massive exodus, 90% of the people were women and children, actually. Now, while there was a massive deployment of resources and a mobilization at governmental, community, and at individual level, another phenomenon on the rise was that of searching for data online for Ukrainian porn, Ukrainian escorts, and Ukrainian women being raped. Of course, we cannot separate the two. The categories of people who are fleeing Ukraine, those escaping the war. Thomson Reuters actually did a study in the beginning of the war, so the numbers may have increased since then, and saw that these searches actually spiked. We are not talking about isolated searches or cases. We are talking about a 200% increase. During the same time, Russians were dropping bombs in Ukraine, and the husbands of these women, about which people were searching this information, were fighting. Also their fathers, their grandfathers, and so on. Now, while there was a lot of talk about human trafficking, even at the beginning of the war, everybody and anybody was talking about this. It seemed like everybody was trying to give out a flyer or bring the issue somewhat in a sensationalized way to the agenda. Unfortunately, this did more harm than good, because what ended up happening was that people in Ukraine were writing on their Telegram groups that they shouldn't cross the border, for example, into Romania, because traffickers would be snatching women and children at the border. While this is the Hollywood version of the story, we have come to know that trafficking is more nuanced than this. And a lot of times, traffickers don't go around in white vans, but disguise themselves as the people willing to help and go the extra mile. Hence, without a clearing vetting system for volunteers, housing or transportation offers, and a tracing mechanism, we might have been exposing those displaced by the war to other dangers lurking right where we are sending them for help. And we have heard about different legislation that's trying to add certain ways of being able to vet that. But hopefully we'll be able to do that in a more universal way. Couple this with the trend of lesser identified victims and a continuous decrease in prosecutions of traffickers worldwide, what we get is a perfect storm, where victimization is becoming the norm rather than the exception that is severely punished. The war in Ukraine is not happening in a vacuum. It comes on top of a proliferated culture of impunity, of a lack of proactive identification, and of major reforms in the field so needed and yet so delayed. We cannot ignore that countries like Ukraine or Romania or Moldova were source countries for victims of human trafficking even before the war, just like we heard. We cannot ignore that apart from internal trafficking, victims are oftentimes moved to 4 to 5 different countries before they reach a somewhat final destination where they will be exploited, and then they will most probably be moved again. We cannot ignore that resources allocated to combating this phenomenon in the system of victims have been scarce and few in between. The question is, are we actually ready to liberalize the protection of the victims and of the survivors of human trafficking? Are we ready to ensure a safe passage for everyone, whether we're talking about the people who are displaced because of the war, or because of people who are economic migrants, or women and girls who just lack the circle of safety to keep predators away? Is this a time in which we may reach political consensus around, let's say, a transnational referral and identification mechanism that would mean that all countries are adhering to the same indicators of human trafficking, the same pathway to ensure that traffickers are punished and that victims are ultimately protected regardless of where they are being identified? Are we at a point in which we are ready and able to recognize the importance of working together and ensure that we are keeping victims and survivors of human trafficking in the center, not only figuratively and in our speeches, but in our funding exercises and in our resource allocation? I'm aware that, as I said in the beginning, I'm launching more questions and more challenges, but I think that it's very important to join hands at eLiberare. We've been working tirelessly, and we're very thankful to international partners, some of them present here, to other NGOs. For example, in Romania, there's a platform of 22 specialized CSOs working on the issue of human trafficking. And from the beginning of the war, we've been working on raising awareness about the issue, but in a way in which we give people actionable steps to actually report if this crime happens, and also giving them information of where they can find help, building the capacity of Ukrainians who are coming in to identify the risks themselves. And also, at eLiberare, we have created around 400 individualized safety plans. That means that we're actually accompanying people who are fleeing the war, and we're creating a community around them that protects them. But this is just the beginning, and I know that we will continue to do so for as long as we are needed, and we have the capacity for it. But we also need your help to ensure that the momentum that exists now will continue, and that we elevate the issue of human trafficking to a whole of society issue, and we keep it front and center on the agenda, as it not only impacts the victims and those near them, but it impacts each and every one of us by making our communities a place in which exploitation can happen. So let's not allow that anymore, not during our time. Thank you.